You'll never survive in the real world if you keep being so soft. Erica, my mom said, her voice carrying across the room, loud enough for everyone at the family dinner to hear. My mother's voice, amplified so everyone at our family dinner could hear, cut across the room with a sharp declaration. Erica, your gentle nature simply won't let you thrive in the harsh realities of life. The room fell silent for a moment, forks pausing mid. A hush descended upon the gathering. Silverware hovered motionless above plates. That then came the awkward murmurs and forced laughter from relatives trying to smooth over the tension. This was quickly followed by uncomfortable whispers and feigned amusement from family members attempting to diffuse the strained atmosphere. I clenched my jaw, staring down at my plate with a tightened jaw. My gaze remained fixed on my dinner plate. I'm doing just fine, Mom, I said, keeping my tone as neutral as possible. I'm managing perfectly well, Mom, I stated, deliberately keeping my voice devoid of emotion. Fine isn't enough, she replied, waving her wine glass dismissively. Merely fine is insufficient, she retorted, making a dismissive gesture with her wine glass. You're too timid, too cautious. You need to be ambitious if you want to succeed. You exhibit excessive timidity and caution. To achieve success, you must cultivate ambition. The words stung, but they weren't new. While painful, these criticisms were not unfamiliar to me. My mother had spent my entire life underestimating me, framing my quiet determination as weakness and my careful planning as a lack of drive. Throughout my life, my mother consistently underestimated me, interpreting my quiet resolve as a deficit and my meticulous planning as an absence of ambition. It was like she had a script she couldn't deviate from. And no amount of progress I made ever seemed to rewrite it. She seemed to operate from an unyielding script. And despite all my accomplishments, I could never alter her ingrained perception. My name is Erica, and I'm 32 years old. I am Erica, currently 32 years of age. I've always been the quiet one in the family, the person who avoided conflict and stayed in the background. In my family, I was consistently the reserved individual, the one who shied away from disagreements and preferred to remain inconspicuous. Growing up, my mother, Helen, made it clear she didn't think much of that. As I grew up, my mother, Helen, explicitly conveyed her low opinion of these traits. Helen is the definition of a self-made woman, bold, assertive, and unapologetically ambitious. Helen epitomizes a self-made woman. She's audacious, and unreservedly driven. She built her business, a small chain of bakeries, from the ground up and took pride in her no-nonsense approach to life. She established her bakery chain, a modest enterprise, from scratch and embraced a practical, direct philosophy in life. But her success came with a cost. She had no patience for subtlety, no time for softness, and no interest in seeing value in a path that didn't mirror her own. However, her achievements came with a trade-off. She lacked patience for nuance, tolerance for gentleness, and an appreciation for any approach that didn't align with her own as a kid. I tried to win her approval by mimicking her drive. In my youth, I sought her approval by attempting to emulate her industriousness. I joined clubs, took on leadership roles, and tried to be as bold as she wanted me to be. One participated in various organizations, assumed leadership positions, and strived to embody the audacity she desired. but it never felt authentic, and it was never enough. Yet, it always felt disingenuous, and it never met her expectations. By the time I hit my 20s, I realized that I wasn't going to change who I was just to fit her mold. Upon reaching my 20s, I understood that I wouldn't fundamentally alter my identity merely to conform to her expectations. So I started carving my own path. Consequently, I began forging my own distinct course. I worked hard, quietly and steadily, learning everything I could about business. I diligently and persistently applied myself, absorbing all possible knowledge about business. And while my mother dismissed my efforts, I built something on my own, something that mattered to me. While my mother disregarded my endeavors, I independently created something meaningful to me. Back at the dinner table, my mom turned to my cousin, Emma, who had just gotten a promotion at a big firm downtown. Returning to the dinner scene, my mother addressed my cousin Emma, who had recently secured a promotion at a prominent downtown firm. "Now, Emma," she said, smiling brightly, "there's a girl with ambition. You could learn a thing or two from her. Erica." "Emma," she declared with a radiant smile, "now that's an ambitious young woman. You, Erica, could certainly take a lesson from her." I smiled politely, but inside, the familiar frustration simmered. I offered a courteous smile, but internally, the well-known feeling of vexation began to intensify. I'd learned long ago that no matter what I did, it wouldn't be enough for her. I had long since understood that nothing I accomplished would ever satisfy her. But I was done trying to prove myself to someone who refused to see my worth. However, I had ceased trying to validate myself to someone who simply wouldn't acknowledge my value. The echoes of criticism after the dinner. I drove home in silence, gripping the steering wheel tighter than necessary. Following dinner, I drove home wordlessly, my hands clutching the steering wheel with unnecessary force. The city lights blurred past the window, but my mind was still replaying my mom's words. "You're too soft, not ambitious enough." Though the city lights outside my window became a blur, my thoughts were still consumed by my mother's criticisms. "You're too gentle, lacking sufficient ambition." It was the same criticism she'd been lobbing at me since I was a teenager, and no matter how much I accomplished, it seemed like she couldn't see beyond her narrative. This was the identical critique she'd aimed at me since my adolescence. And regardless of my achievements, she seemed incapable of moving past her established perception of me. When I got home, I dropped my purse on the kitchen counter and collapsed onto the couch. Upon arriving home, I tossed my purse onto the kitchen counter and sank onto the sofa. My phone buzzed with a text from Lydia, my best friend. My phone vibrated, signaling a text message from Lydia, my closest friend. "How'd dinner with your mom go? Do I need to bring ice cream?" "How was dinner with your mom? Should I bring ice cream?" I laughed, despite myself, typing back. She compared me to Emma again, and apparently I'm still too soft for the real world. Despite myself, I chuckled as I typed my reply. She once again contrasted me with Emma, and apparently I'm still too sensitive for practical living. Her reply came almost instantly. "Oh, please, you could run circles around Emma. She just has a bigger mouth." Her response arrived almost immediately. "Oh, come on. You're far more capable than Emma. She simply talks more. I smiled at my phone, grateful for Lydia's unwavering support. I smiled at my phone, appreciating Lydia's steadfast encouragement. She'd been my sounding board for years, always quick to remind me of what I was capable of, even when I doubted myself. For years, she had served as my confidant, always swift to remind me of my capabilities even when I questioned myself. It hadn't been easy, but I'd worked my way up to being a successful entrepreneur. It was a challenging journey, yet I had ascended to the position of a thriving entrepreneur. My company, a small but growing digital marketing agency, was thriving. My digital marketing agency, though modest, was experiencing considerable growth and success. I'd started it from scratch in my pouring countless late nights and weekends into building something I could be proud of. I founded it from nothing in my mid-20s, dedicating numerous late nights and weekends to creating something I could be proud of, but my mom never asked about my work. To her, it wasn't a real success unless it fit into her mold, brick and mortar, businesses, physical products, something tangible she could point to. However, my mother never inquired about my profession. In her view, it wasn't genuine success unless it conformed to her expectations. Traditional businesses, physical goods, something concrete she could identify. I didn't need her validation. I told myself over and over, but a small part of me still wanted it, even if I knew it would never come. I repeatedly assured myself that her approval was unnecessary, yet a small part of me still craved it, even knowing it was unattainable. A call to action the next morning. I was at my desk reviewing client reports when a familiar name popped up. On my phone screen, Richard. The following morning, while reviewing client reports at my desk, a familiar name, Richard, appeared on my phone display. He'd been one of my mom's most loyal employees for years, a steady presence in her bakery chain since I was a kid. For many years, he had been one of my mother's most faithful employees, a consistent fixture in her bakeries since my childhood. Richard, I answered, surprised. What's going on? Richard, I replied, taken aback. What's happening? His voice was calm but serious. Erica, I thought you should know your mom's business is struggling. The past year's been hard, and we've had to close a few locations. She hasn't told the family yet, but I didn't want you to be blindsided. His voice was steady yet grave. Erica, I felt it was important to inform you that your mother's business is facing difficulties. The past year has been tough, leading to the closure of several branches. She hasn't informed the family, but I wanted to prevent you from being caught off guard. I felt a pang of concern. Despite everything, I didn't want to see her fail. Despite our history, a sudden wave of concern washed over me. I truly didn't wish to see her business collapse. Thanks for letting me know, I said. I appreciate the heads up, I replied. After I hung up, I sat back in my chair, my mind racing. After ending the call, I leaned back in my chair, my thoughts swirling. The bakeries had been my mom's life's work. If they were in trouble, she wouldn't ask for help. Not from me, at least. But maybe I could do something about it. Her bakeries represented my mother's life's dedication. If they were struggling, she wouldn't seek assistance, especially not from me. However, perhaps I could intervene I couldn't shake the conversation with Richard. The discussion with Richard lingered persistently in my thoughts. My mom's bakeries were more than just a business. They were her pride, her proof to the world that she'd built something from nothing. My mother's bakeries were not merely a commercial venture. They embodied her self-worth and her testament to having created something from scratch. The thought of her losing them, even after all the hurtful things she'd said over the years, left a pit in my stomach. The prospect of her losing them, despite the numerous hurtful remarks she'd made throughout the years, created a knot of dread in my stomach. For the next few days, I couldn't focus. Every email, every meeting, every task I tried to complete felt overshadowed by the knowledge that my mom's legacy was crumbling, and she was probably trying to shoulder it all alone. For several days, I found myself unable to concentrate. The realization that my mother's life's work was deteriorating and that she was likely bearing the burden by herself overshadowed every email, meeting, and task I attempted. Finally, I called Lydia. "I can't just sit here," I said, pacing my apartment. "I need to do something." Eventually, I phoned Lydia. "I can't simply remain idle," I declared, walking back and forth in my apartment. "I must take action." She didn't hesitate. "Then do it. You've spent years proving you can handle anything life throws at you. If anyone can turn this around, it's you," she responded without a moment's delay. "Then proceed. You've consistently demonstrated your ability to manage any challenge life presents. If anyone possesses the capacity to rectify this situation, it is you." "But she won't ask for my help," I pointed out. "She doesn't even think I'm capable. Yet, she won't request my assistance." I noted she doesn't even consider me competent. "Then don't wait for her to ask," Lydia said firmly. "This isn't about proving her wrong. It's about doing what you know is right." "Then do not await her request," Lydia stated resolutely. "This endeavor is not about disproving her. It is about acting according to your own sense of what is correct." A plan takes shape that evening. I sat down with my laptop and started digging. Later that evening, I settled in with my laptop and began my investigation. I researched her bakeries, their locations, their reviews, even public records on the business's financials. I delved into information about her bakeries, examining their locations, customer reviews, and even public financial records. It didn't take long to confirm what Richard had said. It quickly became evident that Richard's assessment was accurate. Revenue had been declining steadily over the past 2 years, and the closures weren't isolated incidents. They were part of a larger trend. For the past 2 years, revenue had been on a consistent downward trajectory, and the closures were not isolated occurrences, but rather indicative of a broader pattern. My mom had always been good at baking and terrible at adapting. While my mother excelled at baking, she consistently struggled with adaptation. The business relied on outdated marketing, clunky operations, and foot traffic that had dwindled as online competitors took over. The business suffered from antiquated marketing strategies, inefficient operations, and a decline in walk-in customers as online competitors gained market share. I opened a blank document and started brainstorming. I opened a new document and began generating ideas. Modernized branding, updated recipes, partnerships with delivery apps. The ideas poured out of me, fueled by years of experience in turning struggling brands into success stories, fresh branding, revised recipes, and collaborations with delivery platforms. A torrent of ideas emerged, driven by my extensive experience in revitalizing struggling businesses. By the time I finished, I had a comprehensive plan to save the bakeries, and I knew exactly how to pitch it. When I concluded, I possessed a detailed strategy to salvage the bakeries, and I knew precisely how to present it. The next morning, I called Richard again. I want to help, I told him, but I need to know, will she even listen to me? The following morning, I contacted Richard once more. I intend to assist, I informed him, but I must ascertain if she will even consider my input. There was a long pause before he replied. She's stubborn, he admitted, but I think deep down she knows she needs help. If anyone can get through to her, it's you. A lengthy silence preceded his response. She's headstrong, he conceded, but I believe, at her core, she recognizes her need for assistance. If anyone possesses the ability to reach her, it is you. Okay, I said, my resolve hardening. I'm going to do this. Understood? I affirmed, my determination solidifying. I will proceed with this. As I hung up, I felt a mix of nerves and determination. Upon ending the call, I experienced a blend of apprehension and resolve. This wasn't just about saving the bakeries. It was about proving to myself that I could rise above her doubts and make a difference. This endeavor transcended merely rescuing the bakeries. It was about demonstrating to myself my capacity to overcome her skepticism and effect meaningful change. The confrontation a week later, I stood outside my mom's office at the flagship bakery. 1 week subsequent, I stood before my mother's office at the main bakery location. The familiar aroma of fresh bread and pastries wafted through the air, but it did little to calm the knot in my stomach. The comforting scent of freshly baked goods filled the air, yet it did little to alleviate the tension in my stomach. This wasn't just a business conversation. It was a confrontation years in the making. This was more than a mere business discussion. It represented a long overdue confrontation. I knocked on the door, and her voice called out, "Come in." I tapped on the door, and her voice instructed, "Enter." She looked up from a stack of paperwork, her expression shifting from surprise to guarded suspicion. She raised her gaze from a pile of documents, her expression transforming from astonishment to cautious distrust. "Erica, what are you doing here? Erica, why are you here?" I sat down across from her, my hands folded tightly in my lap. I took a seat opposite her, my hands clasped firmly in my lap. I heard from Richard about the bakeries. "Mom, I want to help." "Mom," Richard informed me about the bakeries. "One wish to assist." She frowned, leaning back in her chair. "Help how?" Frowning, she leaned back in her chair and asked, "How do you propose to help?" "I've done the research," I said, sliding a folder across the desk. "Revenue's been declining for 2 years. You're losing customers to competitors, and the closures aren't fixing the underlying problems. I've put together a plan to turn things around, modernizing the branding, improving operations, expanding your online presence. I know it can work. I've conducted the necessary research," I stated, pushing a folder across the desk. Revenue has been decreasing for 2 years. You're losing patrons to rivals, and the store closures aren't resolving the fundamental issues. I've devised a strategy to reverse this trend, modernizing the brand, enhancing operational efficiency, and broadening your online reach. I am confident in its efficacy. She opened the folder, flipping through the pages with an unreadable expression. She opened the folder, turning the pages with an inscrutable expression. When she finally looked up, her voice was sharp. This is all very impressive, Erica, but what makes you think you're qualified to handle this? You've never run a bakery before. When she finally met my gaze, her tone was cutting. This is certainly commendable, Erica, but what gives you the impression you're capable of managing this? You've never operated a bakery. The words stung, but I held my ground. You're right, I've never run a bakery, but I've spent years running a successful business. I know how to identify problems and create solutions. Mom, I'm not here to take over. I'm here to help you save what you built. Her words were painful, yet I remained resolute. You are correct. I have never managed a bakery. However, I have spent years successfully managing my own business. I possess the ability to pinpoint issues and devise remedies. Mom, my intention is not to assume control. I am here to assist you in preserving what you have created. She leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. Why would you care? I've never seen you take an interest in this family business before. She leaned closer, her eyes narrowing, and questioned, why would this concern you? I have never observed your involvement in this family enterprise previously. Because it matters to you, I said simply, and whether you believe it or not, I care about you. Because it is significant to you, I stated plainly, and regardless of your belief, I care about you. Her expression softened for a moment before she shook her head. I don't need you swooping in and acting like some kind of savior, Erica. I've handled this business on my own for decades. Her expression briefly softened before she shook her head. I don't require you to suddenly appear and behave like a rescuer, Erica. I've managed this business independently for many years. Have you? I asked gently, gesturing to the folder. Mom, you're drowning. You've worked too hard to let it all fall apart now. Let me help you. Are you? I inquired softly, indicating the folder. Mom, you're overwhelmed. You've invested too much effort to allow everything to collapse. Now, permit me to assist you. There was a long silence as she stared at the papers in front of her. A lengthy silence ensued as she gazed at the documents before her. Finally, she closed the folder and set it aside. I'll think about it, she said curtly. Eventually, she closed the folder and placed it down. I will consider it, she stated abruptly. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. It wasn't an affirmation, but it wasn't a rejection either. As I left her office, I felt a flicker of hope. For the first time, I'd stood my ground, and maybe, just maybe, she was starting to see me differently. Leaving her office, a faint spark of hope ignited within me. For the first time, I had asserted myself, and perhaps, just perhaps, she was beginning to perceive me in a new light. A glimmer of change. The days following our conversation felt like an eternity. The days after our talk seemed interminable. My mom hadn't given me an answer, and I found myself oscillating between hope and frustration. My mother had not provided a response, leaving me to fluctuate between optimism and annoyance. I knew she was stubborn, but part of me had hoped the evidence in the folder would be enough to get through to her. I was aware of her obstinacy. Yet, a part of me had hoped the compelling evidence in the folder would convince her. Then one evening, Richard called. "She's been looking over your proposal," he said. "I think it's sinking in, but she won't admit it outright. You might need to push a little harder." Then, one evening, "She's been reviewing your proposal," he stated. "I believe she's beginning to grasp it, though she won't explicitly acknowledge it. You may need to press a bit more." "Thanks, Richard," I replied, hanging up with a mix of relief and determination. "Thank you, Richard," I responded, concluding the call with a blend of reassurance and resolve. The next morning, I went back to the bakery. The following morning, I returned to the bakery. My mom was in the kitchen, kneading dough with the precision and focus that had always amazed me. My mother was in the kitchen, meticulously kneading dough with a level of precision and concentration that had always captivated me. She barely glanced at me as I walked in. She hardly acknowledged my presence as I entered. "Hi, Mom," I said, leaning against the counter. "Hello, Mom," I greeted, leaning on the counter. "What do you want, Erica?" she asked, her tone clipped. "What is it, Erica?" she inquired, her voice curt. "To talk," I replied, refusing to be deterred. "Have you thought about the plan?" "To converse," I responded, unwilling to be dissuaded. "Have you considered the proposal?" She sighed, wiping her hands on her apron. "I've looked at it. Some of it makes sense, but—" She hesitated, her expression conflicted. "This isn't your world. Erica, you don't understand what it takes to run a bakery," she exhaled, drying her hands on her apron. "I've reviewed it. Parts of it are logical, but—" She paused, a conflicted look on her face. "This realm is not yours." "Erica, you do not comprehend the intricacies of operating a bakery." "Maybe not," I admitted, "but I understand what it takes to run a business, and I know you're in over your head." "Perhaps not," I conceded, "but I do grasp the fundamentals of managing a business, and I recognize that you are currently overwhelmed." Her eyes narrowed. "I've managed just fine for years without your help." Her eyes narrowed. "I've managed perfectly well for years without your intervention." "Have you, though?" I asked gently. "Mom, you're losing customers, closing stores, and struggling to keep up with the competition. This isn't about pride. It's about survival." "Are you, though?" I gently probed. "Mom, you're shedding customers, shutting down locations, and struggling to keep pace with rivals. This isn't about self-respect. It's about staying afloat." For a moment, I thought she was going to snap at me, but instead, she sank into a chair at the corner of the kitchen. For a brief moment, I anticipated an outburst, but instead, she quietly settled into a chair in the kitchen's corner. "Do you know how hard it is for me to admit that you might be right?" she asked, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "Do you comprehend the difficulty I face in acknowledging your potential correctness?" she inquired, her voice softer than I had ever perceived it. Her words caught me off guard, but I kept my tone steady. "I'm not here to say I told you so. I'm here because I believe in what you've built, and I want to help you save it." Her statement surprised me, yet I maintained a calm tone. I am not here to gloat. I am here because I have faith in what you have created, and I wish to assist you in preserving it. She looked up at me, her eyes glistening with something I couldn't quite place. She raised her gaze to mine, her eyes gleaming with an emotion I couldn't readily identify. You really think this plan of yours can work? Do you genuinely believe your plan will succeed? I know it can, I said firmly. I am certain of its efficacy, I stated with conviction. She didn't answer right away, but when she finally nodded, I felt a wave of relief. She did not respond immediately, but when she eventually nodded, a sense of relief washed over me. It wasn't an enthusiastic agreement, but it was a step in the right direction. While not an eager consent, it represented a positive progression. Okay, she said quietly. Let's try it your way. All right, she quietly agreed. We'll proceed as you suggest. As I left the bakery, I felt both exhausted and exhilarated. Leaving the bakery, I experienced a blend of fatigue and excitement. The real work was about to begin, but for the first time, I felt like my mom was starting to see me for who I truly was. The substantial effort was imminent, yet for the first time, I sensed that my mother was beginning to perceive my true self. The turnaround begins with her hesitant approval. I dove headfirst into the plan. Given her tentative endorsement, I immersed myself completely in the proposed strategy. The first step was to assess the damage more thoroughly. The initial action involved a more comprehensive evaluation of the extent of the harm. I spent hours combing through her financial records, inventory logs, and customer feedback. I dedicated hours to meticulously examining her financial documentation, inventory records, and customer responses. It was worse than I thought. Several locations were on the verge of closing, and the flagship bakery was barely breaking even. The situation was more dire than I had anticipated. Multiple branches were close to shutting down, and the main bakery was barely covering its costs. When I presented my findings to my mom, she was visibly uncomfortable. When I revealed my discoveries to my mother, she appeared visibly uneasy. I didn't realize things had gotten this bad, she admitted, her voice tinged with both frustration and defeat. I hadn't grasped the severity of the situation, she confessed, her voice marked by both exasperation and resignation. This isn't about blame, I said, softening my tone. It's about moving forward. We can fix this, but it's going to take work. This is not about assigning fault, I stated, softening my voice. It is about progressing. We can rectify this, but it will necessitate effort. She nodded reluctantly, and I took it as a sign to push ahead. She gave a hesitant nod, which I interpreted as an indication to proceed over the next few weeks. I threw myself into the project for the subsequent weeks. I fully dedicated myself to the endeavor. I worked alongside Richard and the remaining staff to modernize operations. I collaborated with Richard and the remaining employees to update the operational processes. We revamped the menu, updated the branding, and set up partnerships with local delivery services. We overhauled the menu, refreshed the brand identity, and established collaborations with local delivery providers. At first, my mom hovered over every decision, questioning my methods and second-guessing my choices. Initially, my mother scrutinized every decision, challenging my approaches and doubting my selections. "Are you sure this is going to work?" she asked one morning as I updated the bakery's website to include online ordering. "Are you certain this will be effective?" she inquired one morning as I was modifying the bakery's website to integrate online ordering. "Mom, trust me," I said, trying to keep the impatience out of my voice. "People want convenience. If we don't adapt, we'll lose even more customers." "Mom, have faith in me," I urged, attempting to mask my impatience. "Consumers prioritize convenience. Failure to adapt will result in further customer attrition." She crossed her arms but said nothing, watching silently as I finalized the updates. She folded her arms and remained silent, observing quietly as I completed the revisions. Despite the tension, there were small moments of progress. Despite the underlying strain, small advances were evident. One afternoon, as I worked on creating a social media campaign, she brought me a cup of coffee. One afternoon, while I was developing a social media campaign, she brought me a cup of coffee. "I didn't realize you were so good at this stuff," she said awkwardly. "I hadn't recognized your proficiency in these matters," she remarked somewhat awkwardly. I smiled, taking the coffee. "Thanks. It's what I've been doing for years." I smiled, accepting the coffee. "Thank you." "This has been my profession for years." She nodded, her gaze lingering on the screen. "Maybe I should have paid more attention," she nodded, her eyes fixed on the screen. "Perhaps I should have been more attentive." Her words were quiet, almost like an afterthought, but they hit me hard. Her words were soft, almost an afterthought, yet they deeply affected me. For so long, I'd wanted her acknowledgement, and this was the closest I'd ever come to getting it. For an extended period, I had yearned for her recognition, and this was the nearest I had ever come to receiving it. As the weeks went on, the changes started to show results. With the passing weeks, the modifications began to yield positive outcomes. Foot traffic increased, online orders rolled in, and the staff seemed energized by the new direction. More customers visited the store, online orders steadily increased, and the staff appeared invigorated by the new approach. Even my mom began to loosen up, offering fewer objections and more hesitant nods of approval. Even my mother started to relax, voicing fewer objections and giving more tentative affirmations. One evening, as we closed up the flagship bakery, she looked around the bustling space and said, "I didn't think we'd ever see this place busy again." One evening, while we were closing the main bakery, she surveyed the active space and commented, "I didn't believe we would ever witness this establishment bustling with activity again." "We're just getting started," I replied, feeling a spark of pride. "We are merely at the beginning," I responded, experiencing a surge of pride. For the first time, it felt like we were truly working together and maybe even starting to understand each other. For the first time, it truly felt as if we were collaborating and perhaps even beginning to comprehend one another, proving our worth. The turnaround wasn't easy, but it was happening. The reversal of fortunes was challenging, yet it was unfolding successfully. By the end of the first month, the flagship bakery was finally profitable again. Within the first month, the main bakery had returned to profitability. Customers who hadn't visited in years were coming back. drawn in by our revamped branding and the buzz created by our social media campaign. Long absent customers were returning, attracted by our updated branding and the excitement generated by our social media promotions. Online orders grew steadily, and even the staff seemed revitalized, embracing the changes with enthusiasm. Online sales increased consistently, and even the employees appeared reinvigorated, enthusiastically embracing the alterations. But not everything was smooth sailing. However, not every aspect proceeded without difficulty. My mom still had moments of resistance. My mother still exhibited instances of opposition. One afternoon, while we were reviewing the performance metrics, she frowned at a chart showing the spike in delivery orders. One afternoon, while examining performance data, she scowled at a graph illustrating the surge in delivery orders. "I just don't understand why people can't come into the store anymore," she said, her tone tinged with frustration. "The whole point of a bakery is the experience. I simply cannot comprehend why individuals no longer visit the store," she stated, her voice tinged with exasperation. "The fundamental essence of a bakery lies in the experience it offers." I took a deep breath. "Mom, it's not about replacing the in-store experience. It's about giving people options. Some of these customers might never have come in otherwise." I inhaled deeply. "Mom, the objective isn't to supplant the in-store experience. It's about providing customers with choices. Some of these patrons might not have visited otherwise." She crossed her arms, clearly unconvinced. But instead of arguing, I opened the comments section of our new Instagram page. She folded her arms, clearly skeptical, but instead of debating, I opened the comments section of our new Instagram profile. "Look at this," I said, scrolling through the feedback. "Observe this," I instructed, navigating through the customer responses. People are loving the delivery option. It's brought in a whole new audience. Consumers are highly satisfied with the delivery service. It has attracted an entirely new demographic. She leaned over, squinting at the screen. One comment read, "So glad I can get my favorite croissants delivered. Haven't been able to visit in years, but now I can enjoy them at home." She leaned closer, her eyes narrowing at the screen. One comment stated, "I'm so pleased. I can now have my preferred croissants delivered. I haven't been able to visit in years, but now I can savor them at home." Her expression soft, and she gave a small nod. "Maybe you're onto something," she admitted reluctantly. Her expression soft, and she offered a slight nod. "Perhaps you've found something," she conceded with hesitation. It was small moments like that that kept me going. Slowly but surely, my mom's attitude was shifting. She still had her doubts, but she couldn't ignore the results. Such minor instances provided ongoing motivation. Gradually yet steadily, my mother's perspective was changing. While her skepticism persisted, she could not disregard the tangible outcomes. Richard was a huge help throughout the process. Richard provided invaluable assistance throughout the entire undertaking. He'd been with the bakery since its early days and knew the business inside and out. He had been associated with the bakery since its inception and possessed a comprehensive understanding of its operations. His support made it easier to bridge the gap between my mom's traditional ways and my modern strategies. His assistance facilitated the integration of my mother's conventional methods with my contemporary strategies. One evening, after we'd finished a long day of prepping for a local food festival, Richard pulled me aside. One evening, after a long day of preparations for a local food festival, Richard drew me aside. "You know," he said, "I've been here for over 20 years, and I've never seen this place run as efficiently as it does now." He remarked, "I've been employed here for more than 2 decades, and I have never witnessed this establishment operate with such efficiency." "Thanks, Richard," I said, feeling a rush of pride. "Thank you, Richard," I replied, experiencing a surge of satisfaction. "Your mom might not say it," he added, lowering his voice, "but she's impressed. I can see it in the way she watches you work. Your mother may not vocalize it," he added, lowering his voice, "but she is impressed. I observe it in how she regards your work." That night, I stayed late to finish some paperwork. That evening, I remained late to complete some administrative tasks. As I locked up, I found myself looking around the bakery with a sense of accomplishment. As I secured the premises, I surveyed the bakery with a feeling of achievement. This place had always been my mom's domain, a symbol of her grit and determination. This establishment had always been my mother's territory, representing her resilience and resolve, but now it felt like something more, a partnership, a shared effort to keep her legacy alive while paving the way for something new. Yet, now it felt like something more profound, a collaboration, a joint endeavor to preserve her enduring impact while concurrently initiating something novel. For the first time in years, I felt like we were on the same team, and that was worth more than any metric or sales report. For the first time in years, I sensed a true alignment of purpose between us, a feeling more valuable than any performance indicator or sales figure. A shared success. The local food festival was our biggest test yet. The upcoming local food festival represented our most significant challenge to date. We'd worked tirelessly to prepare, rolling out a limited time menu, setting up a sleek booth with our updated branding, and promoting the event heavily on social media. We prepared relentlessly, introducing a special menu, constructing a stylish booth featuring our refreshed brand identity, and extensively promoting the event across social media platforms. It was a chance to show the community how far the bakery had come and to prove that we could compete with modern, trendier businesses. This presented an opportunity to demonstrate the bakery's progress to the community and to establish our ability to contend with contemporary, more fashionable enterprises. The day of the festival, the energy was electric. On the day of the festival, the atmosphere was highly charged. Crowds milled about, sampling food and chatting with vendors. Throngs of people circulated, tasting food and conversing with sellers. Our booth, adorned with fresh flowers and colorful signage, drew a steady stream of customers. Our booths, decorated with fresh blossoms and vibrant signs, attracted a continuous flow of patrons. I was in the middle of handing out samples when I saw my mom standing to the side. Watching the bustling crowd, I was distributing samples when I noticed my mother standing to the side, observing the lively multitude. She looked almost out of place in the chaos, her usual stoic expression softened by what I could only describe as Oh, she seemed almost incongruous amidst the commotion. Her typically composed demeanor softened by what I could only term as wonder. Mom, I called, waving her over. Come check this out. Mom? I exclaimed, beckoning her closer. Come see this. She hesitated before stepping behind the booth, her eyes scanning the line of customers. She paused briefly before joining me behind the booth, her gaze sweeping across the queue of patrons. It's busy, she said, her tone a mix of surprise and pride. It's bustling, she remarked, her voice conveying a blend of astonishment and satisfaction. Busy is good, I replied with a grin. Being busy is advantageous, I responded with a smile. As the day went on, my mom started pitching in, answering questions, chatting with customers, and even cracking a few smiles. Throughout the day, my mother began to contribute, fielding inquiries, conversing with patrons, and even offering a few smiles. I caught her explaining the origins of one of her signature recipes to a group of food bloggers who had stopped by, and for the first time, she seemed fully in her element. I observed her detailing the history of one of her hallmark recipes to a group of visiting food bloggers, and for the first time, she appeared completely at ease that by the time the festival wound down, our booth had completely sold out. By the time the festival concluded, our stall had completely exhausted its stock. I collapsed onto a nearby bench, exhausted but exhilarated. I sank onto a nearby bench, feeling utterly drained yet invigorated. My mom joined me, holding 2 cups of lemonade. My mother joined me, carrying 2 glasses of lemonade. You did good today, Erica, she said, handing me a cup. You performed well today, Erica, she commented, offering me a glass. So did you? I replied, sipping the lemonade. As did you, I responded, taking a drink of the lemonade. She was quiet for a moment, staring out at the emptying festival grounds. She remained silent for a moment, gazing at the emptying festival area. I have to admit, I wasn't sure about all of this at first, she said finally. The branding, the delivery, the social media, it all felt so different from what I built. But seeing it today, seeing how people responded, I get it now. I must confess, I was initially uncertain about all of this, she finally stated. The branding, the delivery, the social media, it all felt so distinct from what I had established. But witnessing it today, observing people's reactions, I now understand. Her words caught me off guard, and I turned to look at her. You really mean that? Her statement surprised me, and I turned to face her. Are you truly sincere? She nodded, her expression sincere. I do. I may not always say it, but I'm proud of you, Erica. You've done something I couldn't. You've taken what I started and made it better. She nodded, her face reflecting sincerity. Indeed, I may not always vocalize it, but I am proud of you, Erica. You have accomplished something beyond my capabilities. You have taken my initial creation and enhanced it. Her acknowledgement was a moment I'd waited for my whole life. Her recognition was a moment I had yearned for throughout my entire existence. That it wasn't flashy or dramatic, but it felt genuine, and that was enough. It wasn't ostentatious or theatrical, but it felt authentic, and that sufficed. That evening, as we packed up the booth and loaded the supplies into the van, I felt a sense of closure I hadn't realized I needed. That evening, while dismantling the booth and loading provisions into the van. I experienced a sense of resolution I hadn't known I required. The bakery wasn't just my mom's legacy anymore. It was ours. The bakery was no longer solely my mother's inheritance. It had become a shared possession. A new beginning the week after the food festival felt like a turning point, not just for the bakery but for my relationship with my mom. The week following the food festival marked a significant shift, not only for the bakery but also for my dynamic with my mother. For the first time in years, we weren't at odds. For the first time in years, we were not in conflict. She started consulting me about decisions, asking for my input on everything from new recipes to staffing schedules. She began seeking my advice on decisions, requesting my opinion on matters ranging from new culinary creations to employee timetables. One afternoon, as we sat in her office reviewing next month's budget, she leaned back in her chair and said, I always thought you didn't have the ambition for this kind of work. I guess I was wrong. One afternoon, while seated in her office examining the upcoming month's budget, she leaned back in her chair and remarked, I always believed you lacked the drive for this type of profession. I suppose I was mistaken. Her words took me by surprise. Mom, I've always been ambitious, I said carefully, just not in the way you expected. Her comment startled me. Mom, I have always possessed ambition, I stated cautiously. Just not in the manner you anticipated. She nodded, her expression thoughtful. I see that now. You've done things I never could, things I wouldn't have even thought to try. She nodded, a contemplative expression on her face. I comprehend that now. You have accomplished feats beyond my capabilities, actions I would not have even considered attempting. There was no fanfare, no grand apology, but in her own way, she was acknowledging my worth. There was no grand display or elaborate apology, yet in her unique manner, she was validating my value. It was enough. That was sufficient. With the bakery on stable footing, I started to focus on my own goals again. Once the bakery achieved stability, I redirected my attention to my personal aspirations. The success of our work had boosted my confidence, reminding me of the skills and determination I'd cultivated over the years. Our collective achievement had enhanced my recalling the abilities and perseverance I had developed over time. One evening, I pulled out my laptop and began drafting a new business plan, not for the bakery, but for an entirely new venture. One evening, I retrieved my laptop and commenced drafting a new business proposal, not for the bakery, but for a completely novel enterprise. The experience had reignited my passion for creating something of my own, and I felt ready to take the next step. The endeavor had rekindled my desire to create something independently, and I felt prepared to advance to the subsequent phase. Lydia was thrilled when I told her about it. I knew this whole thing would light a fire under you, she said, practically bouncing in her seat. So, what's the big idea? Lydia was ecstatic when I informed her. I was certain this entire situation would ignite your passion, she exclaimed, practically bouncing in her chair. So, what's the grand concept? I grinned, showing her my initial sketches and notes. It's still early, but I'm thinking about a consulting service for small businesses, helping people like my mom modernize their operations. I smiled broadly, presenting my preliminary designs and annotations. It's still in its nascent stages, but I'm contemplating a consulting firm for small enterprises, assisting individuals like my mother in modernizing their business processes. Genius, she said, raising her coffee cup in a mock toast. Here's to Erica 2.0, conquering the world one business at a time. Boodidi anto, she exclaimed, raising her coffee cup in a mock salute. To Erica 2.0, dominating the world one enterprise at a time. Despite the excitement of planning my next venture, I made sure to stay involved with the bakery, even with the exhilaration of preparing my subsequent undertaking. I ensured my continued participation in the bakery. It wasn't just about the business anymore. It was about the connection I'd rebuilt with my mom. It was no longer solely about the enterprise. It was about the bond I had reestablished with my mother. One afternoon, as we worked together on inventory, she said, I always wanted the bakery to be something the family could be proud of. I think we've done that. One afternoon, while collaborating on inventory, she remarked, I always hoped the bakery would be something our family could take pride in. I believe we have achieved that. We have, I agreed, feeling a warmth I hadn't associated with her words in a long time. Indeed, we have, I affirmed, experiencing a sense of warmth I hadn't connected with her statements in a significant period. For the first time, I wasn't trying to prove anything to her. I was just proud of what we'd accomplished together. For the first time, I wasn't attempting to validate myself to her. I was simply proud of our shared achievement. A second chance a month later, my mom surprised me with a small celebration at the bakery. 1 month subsequently, my mother unexpectedly arranged a small celebration at the bakery. She'd invited the staff, Richard, and even a few loyal customers. She had extended invitations to the employees, Richard, and even some dedicated patrons. We toasted to the success of the business. She raised her glass and said to Erica, the one who brought us back to life. As we raised our glasses in celebration of the business's success, she lifted hers and declared to Erica, the one who revitalized us. The applause and cheers filled the room, but it was the look of genuine pride on my mom's face that stayed with me. The room was filled with applause and cheers, but it was my mother's genuinely proud expression that resonated with me. This wasn't just her bakery anymore. It was ours. This establishment was no longer solely her bakery. It was now a shared enterprise. And while the journey had been anything but easy, it had brought us closer than I ever thought possible. And despite the arduous journey, it had fostered a bond between us stronger than I ever imagined.